Hello, everyone. Welcome to our Plática, the Plática with the 2025 AAHHE Program Planning Committee. This is meant, as I said, to be more of a plática, more of a conversation. So in this webinar, you'll get to hear from everyone in this group about the conference theme this year, and then we will have time to open up the floor for questions and just be in community and conversation together. First, as our 2025 conference is going to be held in Denver this year, I'd like to pause for a moment of acknowledgement and appreciation to the lands in which we will all be traveling to for the annual meeting of community building and knowledge sharing. So with that, we would like to acknowledge that the 2025 AAHHE conference is taking place on the traditional lands of the Cheyenne and the Arapaho people who have been stewards of these lands for generations. We pay our respects to the Indigenous peoples of this region and their ongoing connection to the land, and we commit to working in community and solidarity. And so before we actually dive into the questions, I'd like to take a moment to thank the AAHHE program staff, specifically Kayla Reed, for all her support in putting together this event. And I'd like to recognize and give thanks to the Conference Planning Committee, who not only put together the conference theme, but also engaged in various efforts to amplify our public impact. We had a subcommittee for that, be in relations with the land and the community, which was another subcommittee, and then provide resources for the proposal and presenters, a third subcommittee. So I'm Dr. Cynthia Villarreal. I'm an assistant professor of educational leadership at Northern Arizona University. I'm a member of this conference planning committee, and I'm the chair of the proposal and presenter resources subcommittee. I know that's a lot to take in, but I just want to say that on behalf of our subcommittee, which includes on this panel today, José del Real Viramontes, and then people who are not on this panel today, which include Ruby Batts, Edgar Lopez, and Carolyn Peguero Spencer. We hope that you enjoyed this plática. So that was a brief little introduction to me and my role, and I would love it if we could hear from the panelists, just with a really brief introduction about who you are, where you're at, and then we'll dig into the questions. Antonio, do you want to go first?
Yeah, of course. Thank you so much, Doctora. And hello, everyone. My name is Antonio Duran. My pronouns are he, him, his, él. I am currently an associate professor and program co-coordinator of the Higher and Post-Secondary Education Program at Arizona State University. And as it relates to today's conversation and plática, I had the wonderful pleasure to work alongside these individuals, phenomenal individuals, as one of the conference planning committee co-chairs. And so with that, I'll maybe pass the baton on over to my other co-chair, Lazaro.
Thanks, Antonio. Thanks, Cynthia. So what's good, everybody? Happy Thursday. My name is Lazaro Camacho Jr. Pronouns are he, him, él. I'm an assistant professor of college student personnel in the College of Education at the University of Rhode Island. I've had the privilege and honor of working with AAHHE for at least the last 3 or 4 years. This year, as Antonio mentioned, I'm working as a conference co-chair, and I've had the pleasure of working with a variety of really great folks to bring this conference to you all. I think I'll stop there because I talk too much sometimes, and I'll kick it off to the person who's just below me, Armando.
Thank you, Dr. Camacho. Hi, everyone. My name is Armando Lizarraga. I am a fourth-year doctoral candidate at the University of Texas at Austin, and I've been involved with AAHHE in several different roles. My current role is with the Graduate Scholars Program and with the planning committee for the conference. I will kick it off to Stacey.
Hola a todos. Hi, everyone. I'm Stacey Speller, she, her, ella pronouns, and I am a fourth-year graduate student in the PhD program at Howard University, studying higher education leadership and policy studies. And my role in AAHHE is the co-chair of the Graduate Student Fellows Program. Really excited to be here and share. I will pass it on to José.
Good morning, buenos días. My name is José Viramontes. My pronouns are él, he, him, his. I am an assistant professor in higher education, administration, and policy in the School of Education at the University of California, Riverside. And I am a member of the committee as well. I had the privilege of working alongside all these great people. And I've also been a grad fellow in 2014, and most recently a faculty fellow in 2023 with Lazaro and Cynthia. Thank you all for being here.
Yeah, thank you so much, everyone. And also thank you, Jose, for saying that you were a fellow and we were fellows together. And I also want to say that I was, in addition to being a faculty fellow, I was a grad fellow in 2020 pandemic year. So yeah, my AAHHE roots go deep. Okay, so we can jump into the questions now. The first question that we have is the 2025 conference will be both a recognition and a reconciliation of the first 20 years of AAHHE. Can you say more about why this conference planning committee used that language specifically around recognition and reconciliation? And anyone can just jump in first.
Yeah, I'll start the conversation if you all don't mind. So, yeah, this is an interesting question, and as I was reflecting on sort of what my thoughts on this would be, I think about recognition and reconciliation as recognizing all the great things that we've done as an organization over the last 20 years, but um, also recognizing and thinking about the things that maybe we could have done better in recognizing or achieving some of our goals over the last 20 years that we've been working towards enhancing pipelines for higher education and for professionals in higher education. And so and focusing on the word reconciliation, I think for all of us, well, I won't speak for all of us, but I think all of us might share a part of the sentiment. I think that the choice of reconciliation was really a critical choice to engage in like honest and thoughtful reflection and really thinking about how thinking about inequities, thinking about folks who have been forgotten, folks who have not been included, folks who have been othered. Again, as I mentioned, AAHHE is a great organization with great values, but in thinking about how they've consciously or unconsciously upheld hegemonic norms, thinking about who gets to be included and how that reflects anti-Blackness, anti-indigeneity, anti-trans, anti-LGBTQ sentiments, right? Who gets to be Hispanic or Latinx, right? Who gets to be considered an educator, right? Is it just faculty? Is it practitioners? Is it folks that work in K through 12? Is it community activists and organizers, right? So really thinking about some of these questions and thinking about how do we continue to recognize and reconcile the fact that this is a reality despite many of the amazing things that we've achieved, and using those reflections and those thoughts and those reconciliations to move forward in a way where we don't hide the past and we don't run from the past, but we use it as a way to move forward so that we remember not to forget others, not to other folks, and not to marginalize folks along the way in achieving our goals.
I'm gonna jump in and just add, Lazaro, that was perfect. I think that you nailed it, right? I do want to add that, you know, the recognition just with some current stats that we have, right? In this current moment within AAHHE, we've appointed our first Afro-Boricua as a board of trustee, or excuse me, I'm all academic, as a board member, right, of AAHHE. Dr. Jasmine Haywood. That is huge, right? That is something that we are recognizing and celebrating during this 20-year, right? As the Graduate Student Fellows Program, we have selected a cohort that is predominantly queer and predominantly female from regions that have not been, targeted, as intentionally in the past. That is another thing to celebrate, right? But, while these developments are commendable and signify the movement towards a more inclusive representation within AAHHE, we're acutely aware that these achievements are only stepping stones, right? In a much larger conversation about representation, about diversity, about systemic inequities within Latinidad. And so that's where we come into this kind of like full circle moment of being 20 years and then being able to reconcile, right? Like invite this critical examination of those structural barriers that have historically limited the scope of our representation. And so it is like this and that, right? It doesn't have to be this or that. And that's, I think, what we've tried to encompass in the theme.
Of course. And as part of that, I think we wanted to create a conference theme that honored all of the individuals over the past 20 years who have been fighting and advocating for a more equitable AAHHE community, right? And it's not lost on us that historically it has been a result of graduate student advocacy, those who are earlier on in their career who have been the ones to call out injustices, right? And to say that we need to change. And so this theme really is a representation of all of the labor that has come before us, and that is still to come as we move forward into the next 20 years, and create spaces that do center those most minoritized within our communities. And so just shout out to everyone on this call, because these have been some of the people, as well as the others who have been named thus far in this space, who have been advocating for these changes.
Okay, and I just wanted to say quickly thank you to Kayla for putting the link to the conference theme in the chat. If you click on it, you'll scroll down to the bottom and notice that we have 4 conference strands this year. And so I just want to call your attention to that, because we did spend a lot of time crafting the title and the description of these strands. And so just take a look when you have a moment or two to see what we're going to be discussing at the conference this year with regards to these strands.
And if I can jump in really quickly, Cynthia, I mean, the beautiful thing of to like pull back the curtain a little bit, as Cynthia alluded to,
Please.
right? Like, we spend usually the year before a conference happens, an amazing group of volunteers, such as those who are on this call and others, right, spend their summer, right, working to think about what kind of conference we want to create. And so we do think very intentionally about what are the major priorities facing our Latinx communities, both in and out of higher education. And that's where the strands emerge, right? They're not prescribed. We do not receive guidance. We all come together and have collective conversations about like what are the pressing concerns that our communities are wrestling with. And that's why we get these 4 strands, as Doctora pointed out, right? Like the first one of wrestling with past, present, and future sociopolitical and historical contexts. We as a conference committee acknowledge, right, the rise of legislative violence that is happening against Latinx AO communities, and especially those at the margins of our groups, especially with the upcoming Trump presidency, but also what we're seeing happen across states and local contexts. And so we wanted to invite people who are helping us think through, well, how do we navigate these sociopolitical spaces, while also doing so in ways that attend to ourselves and our energies, right? And so the second strand around reimagining love, care, and energies to heal and move forward came from that belief, right? That the fight continues, but we also have to take into account our own wellness as we move forward. These intersections of Latina, Latino, Latinx diasporas, there was a time very recently in AAHHE that if you looked at the program guide, it would be really hard to find anything to have to do with queer and trans communities, with Afro-Latinx community, with indigenous communities. And we're very thankful that that is no longer the case, and yet we want to continue to foreground that work. And so presentations that are in that strand are those that are pushing us to consider these intersections in really critical ways. And the last strand that has to do all around coalitions and communities We want to hear from people who are doing the work of bringing together across racial, cross group communities to be able to advocate for Latinx AO people in higher education. And so these strands are that representation of our thinking around what do we think is really critical as we move forward into these next 20 years. And just shout out to each and every one of the people on this call and our volunteers who thought very intentionally about every word, every idea that went into these strands. And so we're excited to see the sessions that align with them at the conference.
Yeah, thank you so much, Antonio, for giving that context. And since you mentioned the first strand in particular, wrestling with past, present, and future, I would like to go to the next question, which gets into the future a bit. In what ways will this year's conference theme reimagine equitable futures in AAHHE? I know we've already kind of broached that conversation, but now I just want to ask it explicitly.
Yeah, I think I can start answering that question. I think our intention behind our approach to this just conference to imagining an equitable future for AAHHE was just not critiquing, right, old structures or colonial structures in the way we've conferenced, but also to actively create alternative, equitable, and just ways of organizing, communicating, and collaborating that reflect a more diverse and inclusive understanding of knowledge, power, and community transformation, especially within the Latinx communities. And I think that one great example, and I think, you know, everybody's mentioned it already, the way that we've done this is by developing intergenerational relationships and communication with the more senior academics and leaders, right? With the junior academics and leaders, even students and even community members. It was just a beautiful thing that happened over the summer, right? Where a lot of us came together to make this happen. And I've been part of other organizations and other conferences, and it hasn't worked that way, right? And I think as we look into the future, this is the way that we want to continue doing things at AAHHE, especially for our communities. The only other, you know, spaces where this happens, it's mainly it has happened with me, mainly like through grassroots organizing. Is you know, usually when I was a student, right? But other than that, you know, this is the kind of community and spaces we're creating, and I'm really excited to be a part of this.
I love that, Jose. Thank you for sharing. And I guess I can add, first off, I love the intergenerational stuff that took place over the summer. And I feel
Yeah.
like those are the seeds, right? For like the fruit we want to bear in terms of what we want to leave, right? And so absolutely, pero también, I think one thing that I noticed which was really dope because it's something I always say, no matter what conference I'm at, I'm like, okay, we're conferencing and we're in this space with brilliant minds. I mean, people who are just incredible, right? And who are talking about doing the work, but at what point in the conference do we not actually do the work? Why can't we create a space, you know, that allows us to go out into the community that we are in, right? Because we're taking space in on somebody else's land and in somebody else's community, right? And so at what point do we as a committee not reach out to the community that we're going to and see what's happening, right? Especially, you know, as an organization that represents Latinidad, why not seek out the Latina communities that are already in Denver, probably doing incredible work? And how can we, you know, exacerbate what they're doing? How can we help? How can we contribute, right? And so that's something that we even discussed in our groups, right? And we're like out here calling these organizations, these grassroots organizations, to your point, Jose, and trying to collaborate, right? So that when we get there in March, that we now leave the conference site, this bubble, right? And we're now in the community and being in partnership and collaborating and actually coalitioning, right? And actually doing the things that we just didn't write down on paper, but that we can actually experience.
If I may add something really quickly to both of those really dope responses, both Jose and Stacey made me think about sort of what I appreciated the most about considering our work through this decolonial, anti-colonial lens is that in its most simplest terms, there's no right way to like do the work, right? And as we allow ourselves to throw away those conventions and to many of the things that Stacey just shared, I think it frees us up to do things in new and different ways, and it allows us to be really dynamic and like super creative in however we want to approach that. And I think that's reflected in a lot of the choices that we continue to make over the summer and from year to year. So I appreciate you, Stacey, for saying those things, and Jose for sharing that insight.
And I love this thread on just being creative and doing things differently. And so along that, we've done something different this year where we have decided that folks can submit different mediums. Would anyone on the panel like to speak to that specifically?
Yeah, I can speak on that. So I think kind of going along with what everyone's kind of echoing and saying is, we really want to embrace the community. We know that our community does work in different, mediums, different ways, right? Whether that's academically, through a paper. So this year we really wanted to incorporate, different strands of like, art as an activism or just art, as an activism form, right? As an approach, but still kind of honoring, some of the, the practice focus and scholarships, interactive symposiums, poster presentations, and then roundtables, just works in progress. And again, just embracing all work, but also embracing just where meeting people where they're at, right? Making sure that we're not leaving people out, that we're embracing, grad students, right? That grad students can find this place as a home for their work. Again, whether that be through art, whether that be through a scholarly paper, whether it's just a round table, right? So just making sure that folks feel that this is a space for them. But also, I would even also say, given that we're, part of the graduate fellows program, that that we are kind of starting like a pipeline or some kind of way where they kind of see this as a home, right? Where they know that their work, regardless of what it is, whatever medium it is, that it has a home at AAHHE, right? And that AAHHE is a home for their work. I don't know if anybody else wants to add, but
I love that. You took us home, Armando. And I just wanted to add one quick thing, because of my role on the Proposal and Presenter Resources Subcommittee, is that another way that we are sort of challenging traditional conference norms and is by highlighting a commitment to multiply marginalized individuals in the Latina community, to help us engage in full and broad participation. So one thing that we're committed to doing in the coming months before the program, before the conference, is to provide resources on how you as presenters can develop accessible and inclusive presentations so that we're making sure to be inclusive of members of the Latina community who previously, like myself, might have opted out of being in conference spaces because of inaccessibility. So I'm looking forward to that. And I know Lazaro and I have been talking about it for next year and moving forward, that we want to see AAHHE also take a stand and be more inclusive to individuals that come with disabilities. Okay, so if there's no other comments to tie that up, we're still talking about the future, so there's still plenty of chance to jump in if there's something that you're just dying to say. So what is AAHHE doing to challenge, but also to continue providing that loving critique for the next 20 years?
I'll go ahead and jump in because there were some cookies. I didn't hear nothing. No. Okay. So, as one of the graduate students who challenged the initial title and theme that we were gonna go with for this year's conference, I want to express like my profound sense of urgency and fire that drives our collective vision for like the next 20 years of AAHHE, right? When we had first encountered the proposed theme, it felt like we were teetering on the edge of complacency almost, celebrating 20 years of existence without fully acknowledging the monumental work that lies ahead, right? We knew we had to speak up because quite frankly, we are only just beginning to scratch the surface of what equity, inclusivity, and justice truly mean for all, of Latinidad, is what some of the graduate student CPC members were feeling, right? So, the labor of my fellow graduate students in challenging the committee was rooted in a deep love for nuestra comunidad, right? We are passionate advocates for a future that embraces the complexities of our identities and experiences, right? We want to ensure that our work is not just inclusive on paper, but that it's genuinely transformative in practice. So, we were here to amplify the voices that have been, to everybody's point, right, historically marginalized, and to ensure that every member of our community feels seen, right, feels heard, feels valued, right? So as we continue to move forward, we must carry this spirit of loving critique into every aspect of AAHHE, right? Like we must be relentless in the pursuit of a more equitable space that goes beyond traditional narratives, right? That embraces the diversity of Latinidad in all of its forms, right? So just this means to, actively listen to one another, to engage in some of these difficult conversations that might make us feel uncomfortable, right? And continually question, how can we improve? How can we innovate, right? The minute we stop questioning, like that's the minute where growth stops to happen, right? So I guess that's what I want to contribute in terms of loving critique, because I feel like the former GSFP fellows who were on this year's CPC committee, that's what we were doing, right? It was providing loving critique so that we can be in this space and have these types of conversations.
And I think part of that work at the conference is going to look like finding like-minded people, finding community. So one aspect that we are doing new this year at the conference is going to be providing caucus spaces. So as I mentioned, too often have we grouped Latinx AO communities into monoliths and not recognize the wide diversity of identities, groups that are within this year. And so we are asking you all out in the space that if there is a specific caucus space that you want to facilitate and lead, that feel free. I'm going to put it in the chat function. Feel free to put it out there, right? And if you don't want to facilitate it, but you're like, I really want this caucus space to exist, then also contribute that as well. And so I can imagine a world where we have a caucus for our queer and trans Latinx siblings, right? When we have a caucus space for those who are Afro-Latinx or those who work in grant funding and STEM, like whatever our community needs or what we're hoping to be responsive to. And so that deadline is tomorrow. So please take this opportunity to think about what kind of caucus space you're interested in and put that forward. It's going to be new this year, so we'll see how it goes, right? Like we're trying something out. But I think this is definitely as a way to be responsive to what people have asked for in the past of like, we want to find our people, right? And sometimes that happens naturally, but here this time we're going to be able to provide a structured space and opportunity to do so. Yeah, looking forward to seeing what y'all come up with. And if anybody else has anything to add, please do so. And thank you, Lazaro, for putting that link in the chat function.
My pleasure. I think thank you, Antonio, for bringing up the caucus, the new caucus spaces that we've put in place for this year, and I hope we'll will have a successful response, and it's something that we'll be able to continue doing for years to come. And thinking about the caucus spaces and thinking about some of the stuff that Stacey was sharing in relation to loving critique, I think both the caucus space and both the ideas that were being shared by Stacey underlie this commitment we have to who gets to share in the process, right? And I think an integral part of loving critique is that it's coming from multiple constituents, multiple participants, multiple loving spaces, right? And that we don't own that process as an organization. And I think the committee doesn't feel like we own that process, right? I think we continue to receive loving critique about ourselves and our ideas from the variety of spaces that exist within AAHHE, but also I think something that we do really well is that we're really good about connecting to spaces and places that aren't necessarily a part of AAHHE, but are adjacent to AAHHE in important ways, so that we continue to get loving critiques from places outside of the organization that we then ideally hope drive those folks, to become a part of the organization long term. But I think we've become really open, at least as a part of this process for the conference, to really share who gets to have that voice and who gets to share, to love on the organization through their loving critique. And I've appreciated how that's continued to transform and transition in the several years that I've been actively participating with the organization through the conference committee.
Just want to pull us together again with something that Stacey said, and it was that we need to be relentless with our loving critique. And I feel like AAHHE, for me at least, but I would imagine for everybody on the panel as well, has really let this be a space where I feel like my voice is heard and I can provide that loving critique. And even as Lazaro just said, in the program committee, we were getting loving critique from the grad students that were saying, can we alter the language a little bit? And so I'm just so grateful that he has cultivated that culture where grad students have a voice and they're listened to, and it's not paid lip service. Because I came from that generation of grad student fellows where we were also pushing the committees and asking for more, demanding more. So just thank you again so much for this is becoming like a love fest. I know we all really liked each other and like each other, and are excited to continue to work together. But yeah, it's true. It's because we have such this beautiful shared space. Any other closing thoughts? Maybe it doesn't have to be specific to any of the questions that I asked the panelists, but before we go into Q&A, just I'll leave the floor open for the panelists to share anything else about AAHHE or the conference this year.
I'll start off, and I just kind of want to acknowledge and applaud Antonio and Lazaro for being extremely receptive to the love critique, but also taking action. And again, like Cynthia said, like it wasn't just lip service, that they actually listened to us and they actually, like you really, really, like listened and actually made tangible changes and things like that. So I think a lot of this is because of them. And I want to acknowledge that, just because I think oftentimes we think when we advocate or when we're voicing, a concern or a critique, right, that it's just going to land on like deaf ears. And I will say that it didn't land on deaf ears. I think it was really, like I said, embraced and welcomed. And I really want to applaud them and acknowledge that, because that was something that I was straight up concerned. I was like, man, is it going to just go in one ear, not the other? But it didn't. And I just want to applaud that and recognize that. So thank you all.
Yeah, I'm gonna co-sign mi Armandito, because it was, I will share that coming into this space, I was very hesitant. And this is before I was a GSFP fellow last year, right? And before I became the co-chair for the GSFP program now this year, because of the like past interactions I've had within predominant like Latina spaces. And it was like, I was hesitant, right? Very hesitant. And then I undergo the GSFP program last year, which was so transformative. And I really do think it's because of the leadership we had within our cohort. And then I get to witness the conference. That's how we close out, right, in the GSFP program. And that last year's conference blew me away for so many reasons. But the one thing that stuck out was the fact that we were actively doing what we said, the whole analogy I used earlier, that it just wasn't lip service, it just wasn't written on paper, that we brought in some incredible speakers who really moved like us, right? Like not just me, but like I'm looking to my left, I'm looking to my right, and everybody was just so blown away by the conversations that we were having, and they were uncomfortable. I mean, up until the last session, I remember like looking ahead and seeing like a more senior scholar feel a little ruffled by something that was said. And it was so interesting because I would have thought, right, like not knowing anything about this space, that something like that probably would not be said because of, right, the senior scholar. And we want to make sure that we are, doing the politically correct thing. Nah, it didn't matter, right? Like being in that uncomfortableness is what allows us to like become all that we want to become plus more, right? And so, now fast forward and here we are talking about this upcoming conference. I'm like, we got to match up, right? Like we got to match up. We got to look, because last year for me was just the start. And so how do we continuously improve and make it better? And so my charge for everyone on this call, it's like, let's harness like this collective energy, like this fire, and channel it towards more actionable change, right? Like if you're on this call, you're either an AAHHE member or considering to be an AAHHE member, you're either already a part of the community or wanting to be a part of the community. You may be coming to the conference, may not, right? But if you're on this call and you're listening to what we're saying and it resonates with you, we need you. Like we want you there. We want to meet you. Your voice is so needed in this space. And we're just super excited to be able to provide a platform like this that brings us together so that you see the who, what, when, where, why, how, right? And now, we just manifest it come March. So thank you, Doctora Cynthia, and everybody on this call for being in community in this way, because this is a part of that resistencia. This is a part of that collective action. So thank you.
Thank you so much for that. Another you brought us home moment. So I do want to say that we look forward to seeing you all. And registration is open. So Stacey said if you're thinking about going, there's still time. You can still register. I want to give some important dates with regards to registration and then answer some of the questions in the chat as well. But early registration has already closed, sadly, but registration for the conference will close by Friday, February 21st. And I don't think it's closed yet, but there is there's usually a wait list if we have too many people register. So that's why we advocate for registering early. And then there is, I see that Kayla has responded in the chat, but I would like to address it for everyone who's listening. We had a question about just a general overview of the program. At what time does it start and end? And so it begins Friday, and the website even suggests recommended travel dates be March 6th and then March 9th because of how packed the program is, which is also something different this year. So does anyone want to say more about the program schedule as a whole?
Yes. So this is definitely a change this year. So historically, AHI has taken part over 3 days. But what always happened was that if you were on that last day in that last session, people were already traveling, people were already gone. And so as a result, we have made the decision to make the conference a 2-day experience with travel being on the opposite sides. So the idea is that we have two full opportunities for connection, for community, and then the last day is reserved for you to go travel, to spend time with friends, etc. And so that's been the thinking of behind those changes. And so the conference will start off actually with our caucus spaces, and then we'll transition into our opening plenary, and then sessions will begin, so on and so forth. And so there's a lots of opportunities there. And I know that there are some questions around the pre-conference events. I don't know if our wonderful staff liaison, I was going to say Kayla, may be able to jump on in and give some comments around the pre-conference events, because I know that they've been working very closely, and it seems like they're already putting some comments in the chat function to respond to them.
Yeah.
I actually don't know if that comment was shared with everyone. So were you going to say something, Kayla? Thank you.
Oh yeah, I was just gonna say in general. So yeah, we'll have 3 pre-conference workshops on Friday from 8 a.m. to 11 a.m. And that registration is separate from the general conference registration. So whenever you go into the registration form, you'll see an option to register for the pre-conference as well as the general conference. But yeah, if you have any other questions regarding that, just let me know.
Thank you so much for clarifying. I haven't seen any other questions. Let me check the Q&A feature. I know that the questions are mostly coming in through the chat, which works.
There was a question about if we could give a little bit more information on the pre-conference sessions. Like, I'm assuming like maybe content or like what the pre-conference is about, maybe.
Yeah, I'll just chime in and say I know the details about the Latinas in Leadership in Higher Education Institute is on the website, and I'll make sure to add a link in the chat for that. The details surrounding the Latinx Student Success Institute and the Community College Institute is still forthcoming, but that should be here in the next few weeks.
And then Kayla, when is the program going to be available? And I see a question in the chat function around the link to the schedule.
The program probably in the next month or so. We try and have it, within like a few weeks before the conference. But like we'll also have a separate webpage for all the events, all the pre-conference institutes, and just kind of like a we call it the conference at a glance. It's just like a list of everything that's going on. That should be coming in the next few weeks. So I'll drop some links in the chat.
Thank you so much, Kayla. We do have another question that was shared directly with the panelists, and it's, how can we get involved with AAHHE? So does anyone on the panel want to start with this question?
I mean, I think there's a variety of ways that folks can get involved with AAHHE, and I think it's trial by choice and choose your own adventure in many different ways. I think one fantastic way to get involved is reflected in some of the participants that you see here today. Antonio spoke to this at the top or earlier in the session, when he detailed the conference planning committee that happens every summer. For approximately 9 weeks, we spend time in June and July, 8 to 9 weeks, sometime in June and July, over June and July, meeting on a weekly basis for about an hour on a Thursday, typically is historically what it's looked like. And we run through the process of creating the entire conference, the theme, the strands. We talk about all the things that we've talked about in this conversation, about reflecting on the needs of the community and how to continuously move forward in ways that are important. that is a really easy and I think simple way to start participating through AAHHE. And it's simply a matter of emailing us, reaching out to us through this chat, and talking about what that or asking about what that commitment might look like. Also, we send out a communication probably in like April or May. I forget when we send it out, but a little bit later in the spring semester, encouraging folks to sign up for the conference planning committee as well. And as Cynthia has mentioned, there are several different subcommittees that one can participate on as well. So in addition to participating on the committee itself, there are several subcommittees that you can participate on. And so again, show up and contribute in whatever way you make sense. But that's certainly one way to do it. Armando and or Stacey, would you like to talk a little bit about the grad fellows process? And then Jose, maybe you might want to speak a little bit about the faculty fellows process as well.
Jose, go first, and then I'll jump in.
Yeah, I mean, in terms of the faculty fellows, that's a really good way of getting involved with AAHHE. If you're part of the faculty, um, it's an opportunity for you to receive mentorship and mentorship from more senior faculty, come together in a cohort, and just have a space where it's a combination of professional development, but also more than anything, what I love about AAHHE ever since I've been involved with is the fact that I feel like a lot of us humanize the experience, right? So you would apply to become a faculty fellow. I think I don't know if the applications are open yet, but it's a really good opportunity for you to receive professional development, but also in a very intentional and culture responsive way, right? And it doesn't end with AAHHE. I've kept in touch with my femtors and mentors throughout the years, and every time we go to AAHHE, we check in again, we catch up. I'm thinking about my femtor, Marisa Vasquez. I'm also thinking about one of my mentors, Ignacio Hernandez at Fresno State, Sarah Rodriguez, right? So these are the folks that have served as mentors and mentors to me and continue to do so, right? So it's a very empowering, uplifting community of scholars that you'll be a part of. I'll put the link too for the application. Oh, you got it. Thank you, Lazaro.
And I will say for any grad students on the call, we're actually currently taking applications for the coming cycle, the 2025-26 fellowship cycle. I was a part of it 2024, and I now serve on the board with Stacey for this year's cohort and for next year's cohort as well. I will say that it's a great way to get involved. A lot of the speakers that we do have are within the AAHHE network, but also outside of the AAHHE network. And very broad topics. A lot of the topics that we do cover are along professional development, navigating, the doc life, I guess you can say, with publications, elevator pitch, a lot of self-care. I will say that. I think that's kind of something that's been really important and very critical, at least within the last 2 years that I've been involved. And we meet monthly, and then it culminates at the end of at the conference. So a lot of the grad fellows this year will culminate by attending the conference, which they get support, financial support. And I'll be honest, you meet some of your best friends, some of your best, colegas. I guess to give you all a personal anecdote to this, I met Stacey at ASH before we even culminated at the conference. And we just clicked. And I will say Stacey's like a sister. She's not like, she is a sister to me. I've, we shared space. I stayed at her place, and I think it just creates a lot of connections and a lot of networks that I didn't see myself having. Um, and I think it's a great space. So I definitely encourage y'all to apply if that is something that y'all are interested in, but we highly encourage y'all to apply. Um, the application is due on the 31st of March. And you do need a letter of recommendation, along with like a personal statement, your CV, typical, but the link's on the website, on the chat. And if y'all have any questions, feel free to reach out to me or Stacy, or just the email that's listed on the website, and we will answer your questions. And we also have an Instagram page. We're on social media, so like all of the stuff is posted. The flyer actually just got posted today for the recruitment. Um, and yeah, and I will say that, as y'all heard, a lot of the AAHHE grad fellows end up in the faculty fellows program as well. So I think it also serves somewhat of a pipeline, and are obviously doing amazing, great things in different roles across the country. So Stacey, I don't know if there's anything else you want me to add or that needs to be added.
No, you did amazing. I would just, but what I will add is that I have no interest in being nobody's faculty at nobody's institution. So this is not just for faculty, right? Like we ain't just recruiting high professional, right? This is for everybody, right? And that's one of the things that we as the GSFP have been really intentional about, like setting aside specific slots for individuals who are pursuing STEM, who are pursuing policy, who are pursuing nothing to do with the academy, right? We are building that part of the GSFP, and so there's definitely some kinks, but in working with our STEM, GSFP members, and bringing in external STEM professionals that are part of our Latinx community, right? Trying to build an infrastructure so that we are intentional about being inclusive in that aspect as well, right? Because your girl ain't gonna be nobody's faculty. In fact, I'm looking more into the policy space of higher ed, right? And so I've found my posse within AAHHE, of previous GSFP members and who are in the world of policy right now as we speak, right? And I'm getting connected with them, which is great. And we're trying to build that same type of infrastructure for our bio majors, for our STEM majors, for everybody outside of the higher ed. So if you're not looking to be FFP too, that's okay. We want you también.
And I also just want to add to what both Stacey and Armando just shared, is there is this sense of that you build friendships and you build connections with people that you normally wouldn't. And in Stacey, you spoke to this because in my cohort, right, there's somebody that comes from the School of Music and biology. And so like our paths would have never crossed, but we were fellows together. And then I think it was also just a wonderful space for, as higher ed scholars, our job is to critique higher ed, but theirs might not be. And so it was just great to see like that change in how they felt empowered to, build coalitions and to mobilize and to organize to change higher ed for the better. So that was also one of the, and Jose spoke to this with like the hidden curricula with navigating. Like that was something that I hadn't anticipated, but it was just a wonderful welcome surprise to being a fellow.
Cynthia, if I may, I saw a question around how people who are in Denver and connections to the local community. Karen, please do email myself and Lazaro, and we can find ways to connect. Just for everyone's knowledge, we had mentioned wanting to be much more integrated in the location in which we're in the city. And so the ways that we're doing that this year is we are going to have networking lunches with local organizations that are uplifting Latinx AO community communities in Denver, which is new for the conference. Shout out to one of our subcommittees, especially Jasmine Tobar, who had been leading up those efforts to highlight and showcase and feature folks who are in Denver who are doing the work. And so we're excited about that being a new feature for the conference and welcome additional ideas as we move forward.
All right, so it looks like we are wrapping up. We had an hour and a half slated for this, so we will still have time is what I'm trying to say. So there is more time for questions, but I haven't seen any more pop in recently in the chat. So this is last call for questions and closing thoughts from any of the panelists. And I just want to say thank you for taking the time to listen in on this Plática. We look forward to seeing you.
Yes, let's take a pic. But no, we're excited to see you all. I guess that's my last. Excited to see you
Absolutely.
all. Excited to meet you all. For those of you who will be in attendance, and hopefully this has convinced a couple of you all to join us in Denver in March as well.
Absolutely.
Well, thank you everyone for joining us, for taking an hour out of your day to listen to us. And as Antonio said, we look forward to seeing you all. Have a great afternoon.
Thank you for being here.
Thank you.